Welcome to The Code, your guide to health and human performance. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Fix from Physio Room, a performance-based rehab facility here in Denver. On this podcast, we're going to explore the key areas of your life that impact your overall health and wellness, from sleep hygiene and stress management to nutrition, movement, relationships, and more. We bring you conversations with industry experts and top performers to share strategies they have for cracking the code on health and human performance. Now let's get to today's show. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to this episode of The Code. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Fix with Physio Room. And today we're talking to Simon Escorcia. He is a youth running coach here in the Denver area, runs a program called the Colorado Coyotes. And he's a runner himself. He's a dad, like so many of us. He's moved here to Colorado. And he's joining us today on The Code. So Simon, thank you so much for being here and chatting with me.
Hey, Andrew, happy to be here. Talk a little bit about the Colorado Coyotes Youth Running Club and youth running in particular, and anything else we want to hit today.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And, off air, Simon and I were just talking a little bit about running, little injuries and things that we've had, races we've done. And that's what we're going to get into specifically on this show. We work with a lot of runners at Physio Room. There are a lot of runners out here in Colorado. And Simon runs an unbelievable youth program out here. And, so many people, if you can get into running at an early age and really learn like how to do it well and properly, keep yourself injury free, it can really be something that you do for potentially a lifetime.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Simon, what would be awesome is if you just, sort of share your background a little bit, what you were doing, how you got out here to Colorado, and how you got to, starting this program.
Yeah. So for the most part, I kind of grew up in Burlington, Iowa, which is southeast Iowa on the Mississippi. And my dad was a runner and a cyclist, so he kind of got me into that at an early age. So I kind of started doing that in middle school. It's kind of one of those things where we would just go to local 5Ks and run. So I ran track and cross country in high school. And then after that, I went on to Luther College in Decorah, Iowa, Division III school, and ran cross country and track there as well. After college, I probably took a little break from running, kind of did some other things, basketball, weightlifting, did some casual running. And I got back into it around the age of 27, and I was like, hey, okay, I'm gonna go run the Denver Marathon for some reason there. And at the time I hadn't even run a half marathon, but jumped right into running the Denver Marathon. And probably a week before the marathon, I had a bunch of shin pain. Still ran the marathon. I ran like a 3:27, I want to say. Afterwards, I realized I actually had a stress fracture.
Ouch.
so yeah, it was kind of a painful marathon, and it was one of those things where doing a little too much too soon, got myself into some trouble. But after that, from the age of 27, I kind of kept on running, and I think I've ran maybe 14 marathons. Awesome. Since then. Got my marathon down to, I've hit the high 2 hours and 43 minutes twice at Los Angeles and then Indianapolis Monumental. And then I kind of took a little bit of a break. We started Colorado Coyotes about 6 years ago, and that really kind of consumes my time for some of my personal running, but it's been great in terms of the youth development. And as a side note, I'm actually running the Lincoln, Nebraska Marathon here in a couple, May 1st. So that'll be personally my first marathon since 2017.
Oh, wow.
So kind of coming out of retirement.
Been a while.
Yep. So that's kind of my personal running story anyway. So,
and I was chatting with somebody on another show about her running experience. She's an ultra marathoner. Yeah. I've never run more than 15 miles before. Yep. So, when I hear, yourself or like Tristan here in the gym, people talk about running 10s and 20s of marathon reps. I've never run that distance once. So it's kind of blows my mind a little bit. With the races that you've run, marathons specifically, sure, is there one in particular that was, like your favorite course to run?
Yes. I've kind of hit some of the majors. I've run Boston, I've run New York. New York's definitely incredible. I think those are my only majors I've hit, and I've done like Los Angeles, some of the bigger ones too.
Yeah.
Probably personally, one of my favorites though is the Monumental Marathon in Indianapolis, which I have run twice. And kind of like for me in my level where I was, a semi-competitive guy, I loved it because it's, a 3,000, 4,000 person race. One of those races where you can stay downtown at your hotel, walk 3 blocks, you're right at the starting line. You're not dealing with the logistics of a Chicago or a New York where you're waking up 2 to 3 hours before your race and hopping on various modes of transportation just to get you to the race. So I kind of liked it from that angle. And then also it's a very competitive marathon too, for being such a small marathon.
The course is fast.
And the course is fast too. I think it's probably comparable to Chicago in terms of being a flat, fast course. Yeah. And then it's always I believe it's the first Saturday in November.
Cool.
So that the weather's typically going to be perfect for you. Yeah. Actually, the year I set my PR, it was like 28 degrees out. So it was pretty chilly, but I actually don't mind that. Where again, you run to Chicago in October and you can have a high of 70 degrees.
Yeah, it could be pretty humid.
So it could. Yep. Yeah. And I mean, Chicago's had their black flag warnings out there as well, some of those years where it does get so hot. So that's probably my go-to race, like if you were looking for PR type race of ones that I personally run.
Yeah, no, I love that. I'll have to go check that race out because I've been to Indianapolis a couple times. Yeah. I love the town.
Yeah,
it's like a big little town type of thing. Like it's got all the things you need, but it's not massive like a Chicago or like an LA or something like that. But I've not really run there before.
Yeah.
And I'm totally with you. I would rather run if the weather's a little bit chilly compared to being, 10 degrees warmer than you want it anyways, because, throw a pair of gloves on or throw a hat on and maybe ditch it halfway through the race if you're getting too hot.
Exactly.
So, okay. So you've run a handful of marathons yourself. You've got the first one in the last 5 years coming up here in about a month. But you said you started the Colorado Coyotes youth program 6 years ago.
Yes.
So where did that come from? Like what sort of spawned the initiation of starting that youth program?
Yeah. So at the time, the year before we started it, my daughter, who would have been in 5th grade at the time, and my son, who was 7 years old at the time, we actually did a youth running program through Kokopelli, and Kokopelli's based out of Colorado Springs. Lisa Rainsberger's their coach, and then they have a smaller team in Castle Rock, head up by Adam Christians, both great people anyway. So at the time, that's how we got our kids into it.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, this is really cool. The only downside is at the time is, I think practices might have started at 4:30 and we were grabbing our kids, trying to rush to Castle Rock, and kind of the logistics of making it to a couple practices from where we lived, that could be a 15 to 20 minute commute, every, those days of practices was a little bit tough for us. So my wife and I, we decided, hey, let's just start up our own youth running program anyway, because we got kids in the program. We also knew Ava Mitchell, who's one of my daughter's best friends still, and runs together even now. So we're like, hey, we got these two, let's start up our own youth program and kind of see where this goes. So our first year, we just had 2 practice locations at Powell Middle School and Clement Park. And I want to say we had like 38 kids our first year.
Holy smokes.
Which actually really surprised me. I was like, hey, maybe we'll get 20 kids out here.
Yeah,
and that would be great. And since then, I think we're in like our 6th year now. Our club has continued to grow. I think we're in the last cross country season. We had about 120 kids. We've got multiple locations now. And I think we're probably the largest youth cross country club or youth running club in Colorado. So.
Yeah, I mean, being relatively new to Colorado, I've been here about 2 years. I see those red singlets at all the races that we go to. Kids of all, a huge age spectrum.
Yep.
So like, what are like some of the youngest age kids on the team, and what's the age range there of people on your team?
So the youngest, we typically say, we're starting off at 7 years old, and the oldest will go up to about 14 years old. So essentially 8th graders. And then once they're out of middle school, they're going on to their high school team. So they wouldn't have any need for the Coyotes at that point. They're running for their high school at that point. So Yeah, those are kind of age ranges. And then when we get to the fall cross country season, it's really nice because there are 4 age groups that the kids race in. There's an 8 and under division. They run 2 kilometers. 9 to 10 years old run 3K, 11 to 12 run 3K, and then the 13 to 14-year-olds run a 4K. And kind of the great thing about it is that it gradually progresses kids up to high school, right? So if you're an 8th grader, you're running a 4K at that point. The next year you go on to high school, you're just bumping up a kilometer. Where is if you look at a lot of the middle schools that have cross country programs. Oh, and I should say this, that was part of the reason we didn't start it up. Where we live in Littleton, they don't have middle school cross country at our schools. And nor do the Cherry Creek schools. There are some areas like in Denver Public Schools, Highlands Ranch, they actually have cross country through their middle school. So we didn't have that option. So again, we were kind of looking for something else, but kind of getting back to the middle schools, you'll see a lot of times they'll only race like 1.5 miles for 8th graders, right? So if that's all your kid did and didn't do any 5Ks, that's actually, it doesn't seem like much from an adult. But when you go from 1.5 mile race up to a 5K, it's quite a bit different in terms of, you're working the aerobic system longer and the race strategies and all that differ. So that's kind of the nice advantage of the club system. I think it prepares kids a little bit better for high school.
Yeah, I like that. And I didn't know that little tidbit that you just mentioned about, some of the district middle schools not having cross-country programs, because that was one of the things that, sort of not confused me, but like, I found was unique when I moved here is, I would see programs like yours, kids running at races. And I'm like, I don't remember having access to a youth running program like this when I was growing up back in Wisconsin, but my middle school did have cross country. So I ran middle school cross country. And what I remember was just like you said of, 8 and under progressing from the 2K as you get up to 13, 14 to the 4K distance. We ran, I think it was 1 mile in 6th grade. And then in 7th grade, we ran 1.5 miles. And then in 8th grade, we raced a 2 mile. So it just progressed by 0.5 mile every year. And then of course, I didn't end up running cross country in high school because I was playing football. But it would have been a 5K, right? When you got into high school. So that's interesting. It sounds like, sort of out of in a way, almost out of like a need of like, okay, we're part of this other program. We're kind of struggling to rush to the practices. Your kids are running. We don't have access to it right immediately where we live. So why don't we just start our own? Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, definitely. And as we found out, there's definitely a need and an interest for a youth running program. And there was already, there's kind of like rec programs that did exist. And I always tell parents like rec is totally fine for a lot of kids, but they're really structured different where the rec level, oftentimes it's high school kids that are coaching there, and kind of the level of training isn't quite as serious. And kind of what I like to tell parents is like, I look at Colorado Coyotes as kind of one of our objectives is to prepare kids who want to run high school cross country, right? Like we want to get them there and get them that they can go in their freshman year, they can maybe compete for a varsity spot, they can, handle the workloads. It's not a big shock to them.
Yeah. And I love that, from the physical therapy type of seat that I'm sitting from, because I know one of the main factors that cause people to get hurt is, like you said, with your stress fracture, maybe I did a little bit too much too quickly.
Right.
And that's the main thing that causes people to have running related injuries. And I lump that into a category that we call training errors. The error in training is progressing your volume more quickly than what your body's able to handle. Right. And what we know, a lot of times people, especially that move to town out here to Denver or Colorado, is they're waiting for their aerobic system to kind of acclimate to the elevation and whatnot. But from a running or an exercise standpoint, your aerobic system catches up or advances so much faster than what your tissues in your body, your skeletal and musculoskeletal system is actually able to transition and change. So, working with, kids that are, 7 years old, up through that middle school, how have you battled some of that with over the years that you've been running this program? dealing with this, like, hey, we want to make sure we're progressing kids and getting them comfortable running, but avoiding running into running related injuries?
Yeah, that's a great point. And where I really see it is, I'm an assistant with the Arapahoe High School cross country team.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I've noticed, talking to high school coaches, is they will often be very fearful of, hey, we don't run high mileage. And high mileage is a very subjective term.
Totally.
I mean, that can mean anything. To, some people think that's 30 miles a week. Others think that means high school kids are running 80 miles a week. But that's always one of the concerns with a lot of high school coaches. And what I've really observed is that it's not your top runners who get hurt. The kids that run almost, close to year round, where maybe they take off 2 weeks after cross country, 2 weeks after track. The kids that really get hurt are the kids who, in track season, they barely run over the winter. First week of track, they're doing 2 sessions of intervals. They're going out hard. And the same goes for cross country. It tends to be kind of like your JV kids and your open kids. They don't train over the summertime. They go from 0 miles to 20 miles. And again, they can't handle it. And those are the kids that are hurt. So, those are the kids that I really see hurt more often than, say, the top varsity kids, especially at the high school level. So kind of, again, to your point, I think that the youth running program, again, that helps get those kids ready for the high school level. And again, it's just the strengthening of the tissues and the tendons that they are ready. But then also a big part of it is they go into high school and they know how to do workouts, right? If a coach says, hey, I need you to run, 8 by 400 meters, they know how to pace themselves. Whereas like the freshman kid with no running experience, he's going all out the first couple 2, he's struggling in the middle, and by the last, he may not even be able to complete the session, or he's in a really, really bad spot too. So those are always kind of the advantages. And I say to parents all the time, like running truly is a sport where if you have the natural talent, you can still succeed without doing youth running, right? Like, it's no different than if you had a son who was 6'6", and he may never have played basketball at club growing up in middle school. The high school team's going to find a spot for him, right? So if you have the natural ability, you can still excel, but whether or not it puts you in an optimum position, that's definitely up for debate. So
yeah, and I love that. And you're totally right that there's a protective mechanism that happens when you do exercise, running in this case, over and over and over. And there's, what some of the running literature says, and I think I've probably mentioned this on other episodes, is people who run, and these are mostly adult studies, but I think the same thing is probably true for children, running between 2 and 5 days a week is where the least running related injuries happen.
Sure.
People who run less than 2 days a week and more than 5, that's where the injuries happen. And it's because, you're either not introducing your body to enough strain so that you can modify and change your tissues because of it, or you're just going way too much. And usually what we end up finding on the higher end is it's not necessarily the running that's causing the injury. It's the lack of recovery, the nutrition, the lack of sleep, other factors at play that likely lead to some of these injuries. But yeah, I think, having kids in a program where there was a lot of consistency built in to adapt their body to tolerate the demands of what will likely be coming in high school. It makes great sense to me, and can stave off a lot of those potential injuries.
And I think, one of the challenges with running, and I always tell kind of some of our, top kids at the high school level, and, at that level, and then again, if you continue to go on and run in college and run after, and, if you're taking it competitively, there is a fine line between being in the best shape of your life and being injured. And if you do this sport long enough, and honestly, probably any sport, right? Basketball, football, anything, you're going to cross that line. And I mean, I've been running since I was, 13, 14 years old, and I've probably had every single injury that there is. For the most part, I've been pretty healthy, but I've had marathons that I've had to scrap. And that's just, the way sports work at a very high level. And you kind of have to come to grasp with that if you're not riding that fine line, and again, that's where good coaching can come in to help. But even the best coaching in the world, you're still going to have, programs and kids that develop injuries, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, you're totally right. And, I too have been in that same situation where, you've got to modify something, or you are unable to participate in an event that you had planned because your body's just not letting you at that time. And that is absolutely part of it with athletics. I heard a statistic on the radio, I think it was yesterday, that in the NBA season, which is, winding down here to the playoffs, there are only 5 players in the entire NBA that played in every single game this season.
Yep.
Everybody else, except for those 5 people, have missed at least one game this year.
Right.
Probably a lot of those due to injury or rest or recovery. Some due to, just taking days off to rest the body.
Yeah.
But yeah, that statistic is huge. And any high level sport, you're going to see that, where it's not usually a matter of like, if someone's going to get hurt, it's when is that going to happen, and what's it going to be, and how are you going to handle it? So you said at this point in time, Simon, the Colorado Coyotes is probably like the biggest youth running program in Colorado. You said you started with 2 practice locations. Is that right?
Yes.
Where do you guys practice now, or how many different practice locations, and how many coaches and whatnot do you guys have on your team?
So we have, so originally we just kind of started with our Centennial and Littleton locations anyway. And then we gradually moved into kind of the Denver Tech Center. So now we have 2 additional practices here. And kind of in terms of kids, that brought in a lot of kids that were in like the Cherry Creek School District, which really boosted the size of the club.
Sure.
So now we have essentially 2 practices in Littleton, 2 in the Tech Center, and 1 kind of middle of Centennial Littleton. And then just last year, we moved into the Denver location. We had some parents that lived or a mom that lived in the Central Park area, and AKA Old Stapleton anyway. And she was kind of struggling to get her child down to the Westland. So kind of the same problem I had 5 years ago. So she asked me, she's like, hey, what if we had a practice up here in Central Park? And this was like 2 weeks before the fall season was about to start. And I was like, well, I'm not against it anyway. And, and I was like, let's give it a shot. So we started up there, and we really didn't advertise outside of the club. And she did some, got the word out on kind of some like Facebook moms groups and stuff like that, and ended up with, I want to say like 12 or so kids, which again, that's really surprised me. And they're almost all from Central Park area too. It was a really confined small area anyway. So we started that up in the last fall anyway. And then kind of going into the spring, summer here, we advertised out a little bit more and got the word out. And we're having one of our practices at Great Lawn Park in Denver. So kind of a little bit south of Central Park. And just this week's our first week anyway. So we're kind of getting a handful of numbers, but we probably have around 30 some kids now just at the Denver location.
That's awesome.
So yeah, that's been great. And the interest has been really high there. And, again, for me always, right, it's trying, like, I don't want to grow that fast. And I've had other coaches and, hey, can you guys set up a club in, Thornton and, Westminster. And obviously the hard part is, you need to find good coaches, which, we've been very fortunate to do. We kind of have a combination of coaches that, are parents, and so they have kids on the team, which does work out really well. Hey, if I got to take my kid to practice anyway and I can help coach, that's a great scenario. And then we have a lot of other assistant coaches that we've just brought in, kind of, they're all former runners, and that's kind of the difference too, kind of, believe it or not, at the high school level, you'll have a lot of coaches who don't run with the kids.
Right.
And being at the youth level, we almost always have to be able to run with the kids, right? Because we've got like 7-year-olds, and it's different too. When you get to the high school level, the coach can be like, hey guys, go run 6 to 7 miles, and you're running on roads, or, and all that. And it's kind of limited supervision, whereas we actually have to be out there with the kids. So we gotta keep them under eye. So it's actually more important for us that we hire parents that can still get out there and run and try to keep up with the kids. And I mean, we've got some really fast middle school boys now that, I can't keep up with them.
Yeah.
So they're running, low 5 minutes for the mile or faster. So, you gotta, it can be a struggle sometimes keeping your eye on them. If, especially there's probably one practice where we'll kind of go off site and go down to the Highland Canal with some of our older kids anyway. But that's, always something in the back of my mind too, is we got to structure practices in a way where kids are safe and in a good environment. We can keep our eye on them.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, at the end of the day, you're a parent, any sport or any activity, after school program, whatever it is, the parents are putting the trust in whoever's organizing that their kids are going to be safe while they're there. So that makes perfect sense. No parent probably is going to want their 7-year-old going off and running by themselves, because they've got a mind of their own, and they may wander off and go somewhere else. So that makes perfect sense, and totally different than most high school programs.
Right.
Like you mentioned.
And kids are funny too, right? Because sometimes they'll learn how to kind of like game the system, and we'll be doing a workout that might last 20 minutes, and you get the kid 4 minutes into the workout, "Hey, Coach Simon, can I go to the bathroom?" And maybe there's a bathroom at the park, or it's a porto, and like sometimes I'll start focusing on the other kids, and you realize that kid's been in like the porta potty for 10 minutes because he knows that's his way to kind of get out of the workout too. So that's the challenges of dealing with some elementary school kids too.
Yeah, and what I love is you're building a community, because I played youth sports. I think softball was my first organized team sport that I ever played. My mom especially was a little nervous of me playing like hard ball, fast pitch baseball. And even though it started as t-ball, she was like, well, I know this is going to turn into like, you're pitching the ball, and she was afraid of me getting hit. So she's like, well, how about we do underhand softball? So I get into that. I think I was like 6 or 7. It was like, maybe it was that transition from 6 to 7, because my birthday is in the summer and it was a summer sport. But then the next year, after one season of softball, I started playing organized football, tackle football, right? So everyone kind of gives my mom a hard time about that. Like, you wouldn't let them play baseball, but then you let them play football. And she sort of got, kind of talked into it by a coworker of hers who was starting a youth football team. And when I was always in the backyard, like throwing the football around. So anyways, some of my like best friends were the ones that I grew up playing these sports with. And, a lot of their parents were the coaches on the teams, and they would bring them to practice just like you're talking about. And then the parents would be there coaching the team. And, them are some of the best relationships that I remember establishing when I was younger. And I still keep in touch with some of those folks, even though I've moved away from home numerous times, right? I've moved several times. So I would imagine you're seeing the same thing. Like, a lot of these kids are starting when they're in middle school or even younger. And then some of them probably go to high school together. Some of them probably go to different high schools, and they end up competing against each other. And, but I bet you they're still really good friends, even if they're going to different schools.
They are. Yeah. And, probably the best example of that, again, so my daughter's a junior at Arapahoe High School, and they were state champions this year. I think they finished 4th in the country. And then, Cherry Creek is also one of the top girls programs in the nation as well. And we have got Colorado Coyotes on Arapahoe's team. We've got some Coyotes on the Cherry Creek team. And it's pretty amazing, like the talent level on these teams, and all the girls are really good friends. They'll go out and grab dinner together. And, I was telling my daughter, I was like, man, you got like 8 girls or so that are just having dinner together. That are like Division I level runners. You know, like, you just don't see that very often, this small little pocket in the south suburbs of Denver with like that much running talent. And, especially on the girls side anyway, because you've got two teams just right here, neighboring high schools that are amongst the best in the country. Is really crazy. So,
and I've kind of been just like thrust into that just based on meeting you and meeting other people here in the gym who are connected with these programs. And I've been humbled a little bit in my running experience, because like you had mentioned, there are some middle school boys that are like pushing you and you can't quite keep up with them. Well, there are like middle school or young freshman female runners here that are running times in like these races. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't think I've ever run that fast for a 5K or for a mile or whatever. And man, they're really talented.
Yeah. I was having this conversation with a friend not long ago just about youth sports in general. And I think we've kind of reached a weird time where, you think back to when you and I were in high school, right? Like, I think the average kid was a better all-around athlete than they are today, right? Like, I think there's a lot of kids, again, right? They play way too many video games. Sure. They're not active at all. And we've like swung to one side there on the pendulum. But then the kids at the top are crushing it in ways that, like, I didn't know any kids like that growing up in high school, right? Like, I didn't know a single kid that went to a personal trainer twice a week. Like, you're going to the Lion's Den and working out with a guy who knows running, knows lifting, right? Like, those just didn't happen, nor the access, in running in any way that these guys have access to coaching that, some of the top coaches in the area are very, very good and really know their stuff. And what you're really seeing now is like on the track side, coming off the COVID year, like the times to qualify for state in Colorado, I mean, they dropped almost, I want to say probably close to like 4 seconds, maybe 5 in like the mile for the boys and the girls. So again,
that's a big jump.
Yeah. Like, again, the kids at the top, they're probably working harder than kids did 15, 20 years ago. The coaching is so much better, again, because you have all these coaches that talk to each other, and they're mostly, they're pretty willing to kind of tell you what the top programs are doing. And then again, right, you've got things like YouTube, you've got podcasts. I mean, the information is out there. If you want to be a better coach, you just got to go out there and consume it, because most people are very open with it. And again, right, I go back to my high school era and I didn't have the internet at home. So it's like maybe a copy of Runner's World, but I mean, I was pretty clueless in terms of what, some of the top kids are doing. And, even my daughter and I, we were watching a flow track video. They're called Workout Wednesdays, where they go to high schools or colleges. And there was one on NC State, which is the national champs last year in women's cross country. And we're watching some of these girls, and they're doing a workout running, finishing up doing some 800s, and the girls are going like 226, 221, 219s, and they're just on these practice 800s. And, both my daughter and I were like, wow, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, again, years ago, you just had no idea what top college kids were doing. And now kids can see it, right? Totally. They know what goes on at the top high schools. Again, the Newberry Park's a great example. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
I don't think I am. No.
So Newberry Park is probably the greatest high school boys team ever. And they have essentially 4 guys. Well, three of them broke the high school record at the running lane cross country championships anyway. But again, right, they have, there's these 2 brothers, Leo and Lex Young, but they have their own YouTube channel. My daughter watches it a lot. They're just like, hey, these are the workouts we're doing. This is our races we're going to. Yep. And you're just like, man, it is a different time that, you can actually see what the top kids are doing, and that didn't exist, 15, 20 years ago. You were pretty clueless as to how hard the hardest guys were out there working.
Yeah, you're totally right. And, not only has like coaching evolved and the science of exercise and everything that we know has evolved, but we've seen some of these like amazing elite athletes, think of people like Tom Brady, LeBron James, and you find out like how they're taking care of their body. Well, that's a big shift that I've seen is, what I remember before like football practice in high school was a lot of my teammates, I usually wouldn't do this, and it was more because I wasn't putting money into the vending machine. But it'd be like people eating Doritos and Cheetos, like literally 5 minutes before we run out to football practice. Well, and you still see a little bit of that today, but not with the top people that you're talking about. You don't definitely see that. Yeah. You see that with the average person, and you're right. There's a lot of sedentary activities going on, video games and whatnot, like you mentioned, but there's just a better understanding of how to optimize your performance. And so what I want to kind of get into is, I remember when I was in high school, like I mentioned, I didn't run cross country. I was doing 3 other sports, right? So I was very much a multi-sport athlete. I was playing football, and then literally it was like football straight into wrestling, straight into track, and even if, if we went deep into the playoffs in football, I would even be like delayed getting into wrestling season. And I'd join the team, a couple weeks in. Same thing with track. Is there's a lot more sport specialization going on today. Definitely. Right? There's kids playing like club soccer all year round, or hockey all year round. And from the physical rehab side of things, what I know the data says is that specializing at a really, really young age increases the chances for injuries and for burnout and things like that. But also, that's what's like marketed to these parents is, if you want your kid to be a Division I athlete, they need to get in this club team like right now at a young age. Otherwise, they're not going to have the talents to do that. How have you battled sort of some of that? Because now you mentioned, kids are coming in here and they're working out, they're resistance training, they're doing other stuff. So they're not like only running all the time. But how have you seen that kind of impact what's going on?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by it. And, two of my favorite books are, David Epstein's Sports Gene and
Great
Range. Book. Yeah, it's a topic I think about all the time, right? And I'm one of the biggest advocates of playing multiple sports. I think, definitely at a young age, I can tell you my own kids, my daughter, Ava, played basketball, really good basketball player. And this was her first year not playing basketball. So from kindergarten all the way up to her sophomore year of high school, she played basketball. And it was really hard for her not to, but, it's one of the challenges now, especially, you go to a big high school, is that the sports now bleed into each other way more than they did when you and I were in school, where it was like, again, right, when you're talking about when your sport ended, it was done, right? Now a sport ends like cross country, and there's these other options of, hey, we're going to go to Nike Cross Nationals, right? That's 2 weeks after state. And then if you have a really good team in a non-COVID year, you could qualify for Nike Nationals, which, again, my daughter's team would have. And then that puts you into December,
a month
right?
later,
and so, for my daughter, she was running, she knew she was going to do the running lane championships with her team. And that's early December, so we're sitting there and I'm just like, like, Ava, I don't know how you balance playing basketball 2 hours a day and then trying to run for this 5-week period. And then, you also, if you do make this decision, maybe you're not running as high of a level at the meet when you get there. And are you going to be able, that could impact her team, her team's really good. And so this was the first year she made that switch. And then, my other son, he plays basketball. I played lacrosse for a long time as well. So I think, especially for running, right, it's just such a forward motion that those other sports like basketball and soccer, they're great to work in there with them, where you still get lots of aerobic work, but you get the ability of, moving sideways and working all those other joints. So I'm definitely not one to say, specialize. And, I would say, maybe by the time though you get to high school, that might be a conversation you need to have with yourself, because, on the flip too, I'll talk with kids and parents who are maybe say above average in 2 sports, but they could be really good in one sport and do it in college as well. And you got to make that decision of, well, hey, do I, kind of go a little bit more all in pursuing that. So, but it's tough. And like, again, times have changed in that, and it's not gotten any easier. And I know the same thing too. Like, again, my daughter used to play club basketball, and, that's, kids are playing in the summertime there, it's become a year-round activity anyway.
Absolutely.
So,
and I was never in a position where I was on any of these like traveling teams and stuff. And I remember my younger brother like almost joined this like traveling tackle football league that would have been traveling all over the place. And at the time, we just weren't in a position from a family standpoint where the finances were going to work out for that. And my mom and dad were like, sorry, Matthew, that's just not, we can't do that. Right. But that was really the only opportunity we had from like a traveling standpoint. And like you had mentioned, there is so much more information out there now. And like, what the top people are doing from across country, or you have access to it to just watch a YouTube video of a practice. The only time I ever really got introduced to that when I was growing up was I grew up in southeastern Wisconsin, and the I believe it's a Division II program. I might be wrong on that, but the University of Wisconsin Parkside campus has a cross country course that's well known.
Foot Locker.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not Foot Locker anymore. Was it East Bay?
Yeah, I don't even remember. But yeah, they would hold a big meet every year. And after I got out of my undergrad of college, when I was like running track and playing football, and I had a clinical rotation and I lived at my parents' house for that. I ran on that course a bunch of times, but that was like the only time when you really got to see people like travel in from like other parts of the country to run this big race. And because otherwise I just knew what was going on in the, the schools around me and the conferences around me and stuff. I didn't know what was happening in Colorado or California or anything like that. So
yeah, it's and even in the track season, right? Like there are kids right now going out to Arcadia meet in California, and there were other high schools that are taking some of their top kids to the Texas relays or the Chandler invite. And again, right, it's the kids want to race against really good competition, and especially even more so for Colorado kids, right? If you're a distance runner, you want to be able to go down to lower elevation to pop some fast times anyway, which is a lot easier in the 1600 and the 3200. So there's probably even more incentive for Colorado kids to travel to some of these big meets.
Makes sense.
Than if you lived again in Illinois or something where you can still conceivably run some pretty fast times and not have to travel.
Yeah, you're probably not going to go the other way, right? Most of us Midwest kids are not coming to Colorado.
If Colorado put on a big track meet, they probably wouldn't attract too many high school kids anyway. So
no, that would be pretty hard to compete. But yeah, so to kind of wrap up that sports specialization side of things, like if I could give recommendations to anybody, it would be almost in line with exactly what you said. Like there is such a developmental protective benefit to playing a variety of sports and activities when you're young. And then, if you're going to start to like hone in on a particular sport or activity, I would probably recommend doing that in those high school years where a lot of the development and growth has already happened. And there's still a little bit to come, but you've developed your tissues and your tendons and your joints from doing these variety of things early on. And that like 4-year period there of high school is plenty of time to really like get really good at something. I probably found myself in exactly that scenario you laid out where I was probably a little bit above average in multiple different sports. And I never really focused on one. I thought about doing that because I knew I wanted to continue playing football. I knew I wanted to do that in college. And then my second best sport was, track and football. I was like pretty much on the same probably level. But, I just had some really good friends on the wrestling team. And I thought, and every year I sort of told my track coach, hey, I'm going to not wrestle next year so that I can run more over the winter. And that never ended up happening. I just kept wrestling and ended up getting above average at that. And then focused on the 2 when I got to college. But, that was because I think football was probably my main sport. And I was playing quarterback, and then, my genes didn't bless me with very much height. No one would ever confuse me for being tall. So playing quarterback, trying to throw over some of these offensive linemen got pretty tough. There's not very many, Russell Wilsons and whatnot out there in the world that are below 6 feet playing quarterback at a NFL caliber. So,
and I think that's, again, kind of getting back to Epstein's book that I was so fascinated with. And you also have his argument of sampling, right? Like there's the physical benefits of it, but again, right? Like, hey, maybe your kid's a lot better at lacrosse than soccer. So let's, try a bunch of sports and figure that out. But, kind of on your note too, the genetics argument or point, like I'm super fascinated with that as well. And, if you go on to say the CHASA website, you can look to see, who's signed and, with what colleges. And like, so in Colorado, right, which isn't known as a basketball state, you can pull up and, in most years, Colorado is lucky to have 3 to 4 boys in the entire state that will go on to play Division I basketball, which is pretty crazy to think about, especially when you think about, again, parents who spend so much money on club basketball and all that. And actually on the girls' side, they fare way better. But again, you're talking about those genetics of, you probably need to be well above 6 foot, and you probably need to be between 6'3" and 7 foot to really play at that level. And there's the state doesn't produce that much talent. But then you go over to an Illinois or Texas, and you probably got 40 some kids coming out of there per year that are going on to that level. And then on the flip, cross country or Colorado produces an insane amount of cross country talent, right? We have a great endurance community here, and probably those parents are more likely to get their kids in there. So, Colorado, for not being a populous state, produces, a lot of really good talent. So
yeah, and just to make sure everybody's on the same page, if you are interested in finding out some more information out of those books that Simon referenced, both by David Epstein, Range, Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World, and The Sports Gene, Inside the Science of Extraordinary Athletic Performance. They're both phenomenal. They're so interesting. And, that even kind of like makes me think about some of these like Malcolm Gladwell books too, like Outliers and The Tipping Point type of thing. Like, if you're playing, multiple sports and you're like pretty good at both, at some point, if you do want to take that to like a really, really high level, there may become a little tipping point of like, which one am I going to focus on? Not that you couldn't be amazing in both, but the percentage chances that that's going to happen is just smaller, right? Like, we know some of these people, like, to kind of go back to Russell Wilson type of thing, he could be drafted or was drafted by an MLB team, right? And also decided to play football, but there's a very few and far between number of people that do that. The number of people that go on to excel in one activity is much, much more, of course.
And then the counter, right, is that genetics argument is so strong that a guy like LeBron probably could have played several pro sports, right? He could have been an NFL tight end had he wanted to, right? Like, there aren't that many 6'8", 280-pound guys that roll out of high school. I mean, he, again, Serena Williams, probably the same thing, probably could have played college basketball, could have done a number, volleyball. I mean, but any of those type of sports, because they are just so gifted anyway.
We even sort of see that this weekend is the Masters golf tournament. And a lot of times people will think golf is not a very athletic sport, but man, Tiger Woods, I remember hearing some I guess statistics is the word, but some information about like other workouts that he has done when he was younger, like kind of in his prime. And this was specifically about running. I remember hearing on the radio or reading somewhere about like a workout he was doing, a cardio workout, and like the 400 time that he was able to run was amazing. Like, it was a very fast 400 time, and running's not even like the thing that he does, right? And it's just like, he's just a freak, phenomenal athlete. Because you're totally right. These other people, they could have excelled in numerous different sports if that's what they decided to take that path. So getting back to the Coyotes, so say, there's a parent here in town that their kid is interested in signing up for the team, or they're interested in having their children come up for the team. How many days a week are practices? Is racing a requirement for the team? Like, what if someone wanted to sign up?
Yeah, so best way to sign up, just coloradocoyotes.com. We've got a ton of information there on our website. With regards to practices, we have practices going on Monday through Thursday. So typically what we tell parents is, hey, it's a good idea just to make it to 2 practices per week. We've got lots of locations, again, because we have kids all over the south suburbs and in the Denver location anyway. So right now we're in our spring summer season. So it's a little bit more laid back, and we just do 1 5K per month, typically as a team, which is kind of a little disadvantageous to the younger kids anyway, who aren't quite there anyway. And those are totally optional, especially in our spring summer season. And then we are off the month of August, which works out really well because it's typically, 90 degrees every afternoon. So it's a good time to be off. And then in September, we start off with our cross country season, and that's where we're competing against some of the other clubs in Colorado. To me, it's kind of like the most fun part of the season. And then, the way that the season unfolds, and again, kind of getting back, things have been a little bit weird the last couple of years with COVID anyway. We would have a regional meet, and then we would go on. Kids can qualify from a regional meet to the national meet, and that's kind of gives parents an opportunity to travel, which is a lot of fun. And I would say maybe 25% of the kids on our team will go to the national meet. Last year was in Charlotte. It's kind of been all over the United States anyway. So it's kind of the nice thing, you get the sport right. It's not club basketball where you're traveling 6 times over the summer. It's generally just one kind of trip at the end of the year. And again, that's optional. So no, I love that. And you will be able to get in touch with Simon. Obviously, if you want to check out the Coyotes, visit that website that he mentioned, but you also do race timing, right? I'll see you this weekend at a race that we're going to be working. But I'm sure you're open to it. Of course, maybe not like right when the race is finishing type of thing, but if people are out there running a local race, you may be timing it. They can probably come up and chat with you and find out some more information there. Definitely. Yeah. And, I'm generally available to chat at races. Actually, this race coming up, I'll be running it, Rocking on the River, Littleton, Hudson Gardens. So that's part of my job, chatting with parents and telling them about the club anyway. So I love it.
See, that's what I love to do. I love to get us organized in races so that we can go work it. But then I like to run the race while I'm there. I'll hop in the race and then I'll finish it.
But it kind of works out well because there's generally not much going on once the race starts, So you're like, hey, I can get in here, and then that way I don't feel like I need to go home and then get a run in or a workout in.
Exactly. Get my workout in while I'm there.
Yep.
Well, Simon, this has been fun. You already sort of mentioned this with like the Coyotes, but just to kind of make sure we put this in the show notes and everything, if somebody did want to find out more information, or maybe bring their kid out to check out a practice or something and get in touch with you, what's the best way that people can reach you? If you want to share any contact information.
So again, coloradocoyotes.com. We have all of our information there. We also have a contact form, so you can submit that and we'll get right back to you. But that's one of the questions we have too, is, we have a lot of parents like, I don't know if my kid will like this or not. Can I come? We're like, hey, come check out a week, a couple practices. And if you like it, sign up. If you don't, it's not a big deal. Running is definitely not for everyone. It's a hard sport. So we realize that as well. So we wouldn't make anyone commit if they were unsure of it. So,
Awesome. Well, I really, again, appreciate you being here, hopping on this. This was a fun conversation with me. It's always fun to talk about running, but then when we start talking about, specializing in sports and injuries and all this stuff, I really get jazzed up.
Definitely.
Thanks again for your time. We'll see you at the race this weekend. And for all of you, thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Code with Simon Escorcia. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.